Hello, everyone. Today we have with us Rachelle Bryant, passionate storyteller and two-time best-selling author. Rachelle is dedicated to empowering others to share their voices with the world, and she does not do so lightly. Even as she's hot on the heels of her latest bestseller, Rooted to Rise, an anthology she personally curated and published through Wildly Free, she is with us today to discuss her upcoming book, Expiration Date Unknown. Because when she decides to blaze trails, she doesn't hesitate to go first. To know Rachelle is to know she does everything with intention and invitation without expectation. And this book is exactly that, an invitation into a space so intentionally, lovingly, and phenomenally crafted that we're beyond excited to get it into your hands starting March 13th. So Rachelle, welcome.
Thank you so much for those sweet, kind words. I am just blown away that I get to do this with you and I get to do this with so many others. So thank you.
Well, we are excited and I can't wait for you to share with everybody today some of the insights behind your book. So can you tell us just a little bit about the book and what inspired you to write about your journey with PKD and transplant?
Absolutely. So what inspired me was, first of all, being able to be 4.5 years out. That was my biggest inspiration. And I knew that with something as difficult as having PKD and going through the transplant process and even having added elements like doing it all during COVID and all the things, that I wanted to take something that was hard and recycle it into something good. And I really am in those spaces a lot these days, is that I need to do something with all the things. And so I knew I wanted to write the book, focusing a lot on the moment, kind of like the moments leading up to it. And then as I wrote the book and started crafting it and had the amazing editing by you and James, it turned into something so much more. And what it really fell into was the story behind the story behind the story. Because whenever anybody talks about any part of themselves, there's always story layers, right? We have layers to stories, just like we have layers. And so through your amazing editing, I dug deeper into parts that would help the readers understand who I was when I walked into what my original thought for the book was. So,
yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I appreciate about this book the most is that it's more than just a transplant journey book. There are toxins that are dealt with in this book that are beyond just what would happen because somebody's dealing with the kind of kidney transplant and all of the background with PKD that somebody like you did. And writing something like this can be extremely vulnerable. So can you tell us, like, what made you choose to put your story out there like that? And like, I know you already talked about that it was kind of 4 years, but I've also heard you term this book a legacy book. So why now? Kind of how are you grappling with that vulnerability and why in this space right now?
I think I cheated in a way because true vulnerability is stepping into a new day as a terminal person. So I think that in terms of the vulnerability aspect of it, it was really giving myself permission to, in a way, process some things that I've ignored and continue to process other things that I've put to the side, and giving myself permission to give certain things less power and other things more power. And it's really just like that balancing act of, if this could help someone, then as I was typing, especially on those Mondays that you offer that writing hour, that's when I just flowed and I would write like over 1,000 words because I could visualize the type of person that needed to hear certain parts. And so, in a sense, was I doing it for myself? Yes. But I was really doing it for others. And it makes it so much easier for me to know that temporary discomfort may result in permanent opportunities for others.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so that like just kind of made vulnerability go out the door because it wasn't about me. It was
Mm-hmm.
about who was going to read it on the transplant side, who was going to read it in all the chapters leading up to the transplant, who was it going to help, even if it wasn't a same exact situation, but a similar situation. And I believe knowledge is power. And it doesn't have to even be knowledge about one particular subject. Just feeding our souls with knowledge helps us show up better. So,
Absolutely. And be better humans,
mhm.
be more well-rounded. And I can speak for myself personally. I've never been through a transplant. I've not experienced a lot of the things that you experienced. And your book changed my life. And your book has already had a dramatic impact on my family and the things that I know and that I'm able to do. And so I'm excited for people to hear your words and to understand that, yeah, this is a transplant book, but it is not only for people who are experiencing transplants or people who are caring for those who've experienced transplants. This book is so chock full of truth that it is a book for everyone, and we need to get it in everyone's hands. So I'm really excited about that. What would you say is the most either difficult part of this process for you? And then on the other side, what was the most rewarding part of this process for you?
Well, currently I'm in the process of being very shy about sharing it. Um, I just did my first official post today, but I put it in my stories because when you do things for others, it's so hard to have attention put on yourself. So for Rooted to Rise, the book that we just released a month ago, it was so easy for me to show up because I was showing up for the other authors. To show up for myself is still an opportunity. And so the writing isn't where the vulnerability is. It's the telling people and having attention focused solely on me. And so that's really where I'm struggling. And so, yeah, it's just that balance of I know everyone can benefit from this book, but getting over my fear of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm going to gain more attention when you all read it. You're going to have some things you might want to share with me, which I will gladly receive. But the parts that I struggle with the most is like if it's talking to a part of me, whether it's like little Rachelle or current Rachelle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where I am with all of that right now. So
Yeah. What's been the most rewarding part of the process for
so
you?
the most rewarding is knowing I did it.
Yeah.
Tried everything, I did it. And it's my legacy book because I'm not guaranteed another day.
Mm-hmm.
So that element, like, that's how I showed up for myself and for my kids and for my husband and for my friends. So for me, kind of sharing all of those parts of like, I showed up for myself here, I showed up for myself here, I showed up for myself here, and like really having something like on a hard day that I can pick up my own book
Mm-hmm.
and be like, you did it, you're consistent, you've always been consistent, keep going. Woo.
Mm-hmm. I know it's making me emotional too. So, but on the heels of that, I really want to ask you, you and I both know being a part of Wildly Free, having lots of conversations with people, there are so many people who struggle to take that first step to tell their stories, right? To show up for themselves in this way that you have, because it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy work. And you would never tell anybody that it's
So,
easy work. So, which is part of what I love about the fact that you've gone first, because when people come to you, they're going to be able to hear these things from somebody who has lived it and lived it in a big way. So what would you tell who is interested in maybe writing their own story or thinks that they maybe have a story that should be written?
I love this question because I had a conviction just this morning.
Mm,
You know, being a storyteller, being in publishing, encouraging others, sitting in the spaces of people, it's a lot of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a beautiful journey. I don't ever want anybody to ever think that like I'm ever going to sit in spaces that I haven't already sat in myself. And so this morning, something really beautiful was kind of born of what kind of publisher do I want to be? And I went into publishing not knowing anything, but knowing that it was exactly what I needed to do. And so what I came up with is creating an invitation for people to write their brave. And there's a song that is about being brave and having your voice heard and all the things. And then I wrote a Facebook post about watching my son step into his
Mm-hmm.
brave, going into this next chapter that he's about to go into. And I really want to lovingly support people to do it anyway and write their brave story. You know, we have other terms like legacies and, you know, things centered around all of that. But really, what it comes down to that I'm deciding what the word really is finding your brave and doing it anyways. And that first step is, you know, giving yourself permission to sit with yourself in your bravery
Mm-hmm.
and asking someone else to sit in that space with you. And then learning how to get started and learning how to show up for yourself when it gets really hard. Because I tell everybody that everything is going to try to derail you from finishing your story, whether it's a chapter in an anthology or your book or whatever it is. And so being that loving support, the part that I get to do with Wildly Free is that I get to encourage other people to just keep going. And I think that this book is really going to give tons of permission for people to show up for themselves and go, well, yeah, it's hard, but I'm going to keep showing up. You know, oh, here's another one that's hard, but I'm going to keep showing up. And so this book just has so many messages now that I'm like reflecting on it while talking to you, is that it's everything that I stand for, everything that I put out into the world, and everything that I will be showing up for anyone who wants to write their brave story.
So speaking of that, I love that you were talking about that. I was curious, and I could only imagine that there are other people who are curious too, now that you're a publisher. I think this book is going to make it into people's hands and is going to inspire people to really want to pick up and write their own story. And there may be a lot of different levels of that, right? And so I'm wondering, do you, and Wildly Free, are there any other opportunities for someone who might have been on a transplant journey of their own or supported someone through a transplant journey? Do you guys have any plans for things like that, spaces for people like that?
We do. So the first invitation is at the back of the book, Expiration Date Unknown, and it's actually a surprise even to you that you don't know
Oh,
about. So even as my editor, so I'm super excited for you to be surprised by that. And then we are going to curate. The first book is going to be specific to kidney transplants. So I've been in so many spaces this last year and invited in so many places to share my story in different ways about my transplant. So we're inviting people to apply to, like if you were a kidney donor, a living kidney donor, we're making space for that. We're also making space for people who have transplant stories that are kidney specific. And then none of this would be possible without the beautiful caregivers. So the first book that we are going to talk about in April of 2025 is creating that invitation for donors, recipients, and caregivers. And then from there, we're going to do other transplant stories that can involve any type of organ, bone marrow, all of the things, and corneas. There's so many transplants people don't even know about. And so in the book, it's got it focuses a lot on that first anthology that we're going to do. And I'm so excited for people to be able to pick up the book and resonate with what part they might be in, or even create invitations for more living donors. And really a lot of my motivation behind that, behind this whole thing, my book and this book, and really the whole campaign that I'm developing, is to just create awareness and create education and create opportunities for more people to live longer, because people say yes to their spare kidney because we only need one, and we can live a very full, fulfilling life, and you give somebody a second chance to make memories and keep going and fighting for their life. So
I love that. It's so beautiful. And I love that you're having this opportunity to share this message. I know that there's been a lot of buzz around your story due to your interviews with Next Step, Next One. And so I would love for people to go out and check out those videos, make sure that they've seen those. They're doing a great job of raising awareness. It also makes me wonder, like, is this the end of you writing about your journey? Or is there going to be more to this book that's coming just for you? I know there's going to be this anthology, but is this the end of your story that you're writing?
it absolutely isn't the end of my story. I'm actually already started book 2. It takes you from, well, I can't give away, there's like a little cliffhanger at the end of the book 1, but it starts from the cliffhanger of book 1 and jumps right into book 2. And this August 27th, I'll be celebrating my 5-year kidneyversary. And so I'm writing it up to the 5 years and really detailing what those first 5 years have been like, not only from a medical standpoint, but I'm going to dive in about the opportunities I've had because of living donor, having my living donors and being able to have that opportunity. So you get to dive into what my life has been like and what I've been given and what I've been able to give to others because of people saying yes and getting 5 bonus years is what I like to call it. And then every 5 years, I'm gifting myself and others the opportunity to read about the journey in 5-year segments. So I'm not quitting, and I just pray every day that I get one more day, one more week, one more month, and one more year. So very excited.
Your story is so powerful, and I want people to understand that there's more to come, because you don't want to miss out on this beginning part. Because to read this beginning, to get your hands on Expiration Date Unknown, and to understand the mindset that you had and all the ways that you've shifted and grown. I know that you often talk about, there's like a pre-transplant Rachelle, and then there's like a post-transplant Rachelle, and just the ways that you've grown. I want this book in as many hands as possible, because I want people to understand all those different sides, because so many of us have our own stories where there's a before and an after, a then and a now. And so I think there's real beauty and real power that's in that. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, I want you to be able to talk about, what do people need to know about Expiration Date Unknown? What is something that they need to know about this book, about a choice to pick up this book? What do they need to know?
First and foremost, grab some Kleenex.
I would agree.
Because all of my advanced readers said that I should put a warning label on the book. I'm not putting a warning label on the book because I don't want to create an invitation with expectation that it is going to move you.
Yeah.
I really also invite people to read the very first page. I know a lot of times people kind of skip over those. And so I want to create an invitation about that, because literally every single word is intentional, intentionally crafted, because there's going to be parts that are going to resonate with every single person. There's literally not one person that cannot get something from this book. So by reading it and processing it, you're giving yourself the gift of so much permission. That's really what it comes down to. And just know that PKD in and of itself affects more people than you know. So many people go undiagnosed. So many people get overlooked by doctors. Oh, having cysts on both kidneys, that's your diagnosis. And there's so many people and so many doctors that aren't honoring that, where you could be more proactive and, take better care of yourself or make different choices. And it's just, it's such a awful disease. And I feel that, through this process, for the very first time, I allowed myself to get angry. I've known since I was 16, but it wasn't until I wrote parts of it that I started getting angry, not necessarily that I have it, but angry that for all the injustices surrounded by it.
Yeah.
And so it's a book literally poured from my heart. So not only will you get that aspect of what can you take away from reading the book, but you also get an invitation into my heart and my brain of how I process things. And there's so much I could say about the book, but I do want to share a special little tidbit about the title, because I've gotten a lot of feedback about the title. I usually start every morning with a cup of tea and some time with God. And I'm not religious whatsoever. And you're going to read a lot about that in my book. But I'm very spiritual, and I've always had a very strong foundation of my consistent thing in this world. And that's my relationship with God. And I remember just being in that space and being told Expiration Date Unknown. And it's a very unique title. It doesn't exist anywhere. And it got me thinking of how so many of us take advantage of, we're just going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to grow old, and then we're going to die in our sleep, and da da da. And so the title in of itself, I hope, gives people perspective that no one, whether you have a disease or not, no day is promised, and that we need to get away from the distractions that try to steal our joy.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite perspectives that continues to show up, especially later in the book too, is that there is an element of that is a gift. There's an element of that it's just this beautiful space to live in, which creates so much of how you live intentionally, and so much of how it drives so much of how you offer things that you offer in this space. So I think it's really beautiful, and I can't wait for people to get their hands on it. My very last question is this. So people have listened to you. They're totally going to run out and make sure that they have March 13th bookmarked on their calendar. We're going to make sure that we grab it on Amazon. But what do you want people to know about what it was like specifically to write through Wildly Free? What was it like for you? Because I know that you've written with different publishers. And so, yes, this is your own space. This is your own publishing house, but you got to experience what it's like to write with Wildly Free. And so what would you share with people?
Oh, I love that I get to talk about this. First and foremost, the design of the cover, the jacket, everything, and even a lot of the pages inside, you get a sneak peek of me. That was just so beautifully honored. I knew what I wanted, but then when it was designed, this cover, that alone, just, I would say that editing with you and James, editing with the two of you is just a different space. It's not about grammar, punctuation at all. That stuff just happens behind the scenes. But the questions the two of you ask are the most thought-provoking questions I think I've ever experienced. And you don't push to okay, well, did you look at that? Did you da-da-da? They're put in a way where you get to sit and process. And even after you think you've sat and processed, you go back and I went back literally after editing and added 6 more pages because of the questions I wanted to keep avoiding. And so to be seen from a male and a female point of view is just so magical because it's very much, the masculine and the feminine coming together to create a masterpiece. And not only like in a book, but a masterpiece like in healing within yourself, where even if you don't like, even if I didn't want to write about it, I knew that there was a reason why I should. And so I just trusted.
Mm-hmm.
And, those elements. And then, of course, just having our web developer make it look so pretty on the website and everything, and all the graphics and the reels and everything. It was like being able to write with a family. And that's why we are Wildly Free, because we want people to show up vulnerable, authentic, intentionally, and just be in those spaces together. So the fact that I get to publish my first book with my own publishing team that's why we are together. That's why I feel like we were all called to do this and together, because this was not on any of our radars.
Mm-hmm.
And we were chosen. We were literally chosen to get people's messages out there and make it safe for them, because there's not enough safe in the world right now. And I just want people to understand that despite any other past experiences, this is not a business. This is a mission for us. Mm-hmm. And we put that love and care into literally every single step of the process. So, I can keep going on and on talking about you guys.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. Guys, if there has been any portion of this interview where you have looked at it and you're like, oh, I wonder if that book then is for me, I promise that it is for you. Bookmark March 13th. Make sure that you get a copy of Expiration Date Unknown in your hands. Make sure you share it with your friends, because guys, it's gonna change lives. The messages, the things that are in it, it was meant for you. It was lovingly and so intentionally crafted for every single person who's going to put their hands on it. You're not going to want to miss it. Thanks so much for hanging out with Rachelle and I today, and we'll catch you on our next Meet the Author podcast.
Thank you, everyone.